project for today is actually going to be recovering, or actually making new cushions for these 2 rattan chairs that we have here on the boat. The cushions that we have here are actually store-bought ones that don't exactly fit, and you can see we've lost a button out of one, so they're getting a little worn looking. So we're going to make one that actually fits the seat like it's custom made. So we'll go ahead and get started that, and I'll see you on the other side. So what I've done first with this cushion is I needed to get it pushed back all the way back here, and the sides actually fit really well. They are right at the edge of the chair. And then I had to kind of push this down, and then from underneath I took my Sharpie pen and just ran it along the edge of the chair seat and ran a mark on here. And when you turn this over, you can see the curve I made following the chair shape. So I'm going to have to actually bring this, I'm going to cut it to here on both sides, and then what I'll need to do is then fix the curve to this once I have these corners off. Ideally, when you're cutting foam, it's great if you can have a foam cutter, or even one of those electric carving knives works great. I don't have that option here in the boat, so I'm actually having to use a utility blade, and it does make kind of a chopped up, appearance, but I can smooth that out with a little bit of batting if I need to, just so that it has a nice curve to it. Overall, it doesn't look that bad. I mean, it's going to get squished down, but I will clean it up a little bit with my blade to get it as smooth as I can. I'm going to go ahead and do the other side here and then check for fit. Okay, it's not a bad fit, but what I want to do is I want to soften these corners back here just a little bit, get it to snug back just a little bit more, but actually I got a pretty good fit here. And I'm just going to go ahead and smooth up any roughness that's to the foam, and then we'll go ahead and start working on a pattern for the fabric cover. This is the fabric I'm using for the chair cushions, and what I did is I laid my cushion down. It's been cut to the size of a chair, and I laid it down on the fabric, and I positioned it so that one of these shapes is centered on the cushion. So this shape right here, this is the center, and I've traced. It's very hard to see. I use my fabric erase pen, but I did trace around the cushion. And now what I'm going to do is just add a 1/2 inch seam allowance all the way around. I'll cut it out and then cut out the second piece the same way, making sure to center the design of the fabric to the cushion. I do have my top and bottom panel cut out, but before I do anything else with this fabric ravels so easily, so I'm going to go ahead and do a zigzag stitch all around that just so that it keeps it together. A good thing to use would also be a serger, which I did not bring with me to the boat, so I'm just going to go ahead and do a zigzag stitch all around before we start assembling and putting the piping on. When it comes to making piping, I like to give myself about 1.5 inches, and then I add the diameter of the cord that I'm going to be using for the piping, and then in this case it is 3/16 of an inch. So I cut my strips at 2 7/8, and by the time I get this sewn, it's going to give me a little bit over 5/8 of an inch, but that'll be plenty, and I can always trim that down. I'm going to be sewing my strips together. I'm going to be doing it the same way I do my binding for quilting, and I'm just going to be putting the right sides together and then sewing diagonally across there, and that way I will decrease the bulk at the joinery. I'm sewing the piping into the fabric now, and I do have my regular foot on, but I have moved my needle as far to the left as I can, but I'm not as close to the piping as I want to be at the finished product. And the reason for that is because I don't want this stitch seam to show after I've installed the piping. So I'm going to go ahead and install the piping all the way through the entire length of the fabric strip that I've cut. When I approach one of my joining strip seams, I just press that open and then continue sewing like normal. I I've trimmed my piping so that it's a 1/2 inch from the inside of that cord to the outer edge right here. And that way I know by lining up the 2 raw edges of the piping fabric and the fabric of my seat cushion, that's going to give me a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and that'll be real good. So what I'm doing now is I'm laying the piping down on the right side of the top of my cushion. And anytime I get to a curve where it won't lay down flat anymore, I'll show you back here, I just put a little snip in the fabric, but never go over the stitching right there. And then that gives you, and here you see I got a little sharper curve, so I did like 3 snips, and that just gives me a nice gentle curve. Everything's gonna lay down nice and flat. And then once I get this all put on, I'll go ahead and sew, going over the previous stitching, because I still don't want to get too close to this and have that stitching show. That'll happen when I sew the side panels or the sidewall panels to the cushion. So I'm going to go ahead and finish pinning the piping to the top of the cushion, and I will also be doing it to the bottom of my cushion. I just wanted to show on the 90 degree turn, I did several snips in the fabric. And it does look bunchy right here where the cord is, but just so that you know, once this gets turned, that's actually going to be going out to the outside, so it'll lay nicely once that's been turned out. So what I've done here is I've actually undone some of the stitching on the piping, and I overlapped the 2 ends and marked it for a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and then cut them so that they're at that 1/2 inch. And then I'm going to go ahead and put the right sides together and just seam that together, and then cut the cord in order for the ends to butt end to end, and then just sew that down, and we have a continuous piping all the way around the seat. I failed to show my cutting of this first strip for my zipper. My foam is 2 inches thick, so I want my zipper to pretty much lay in the middle of that panel. And so 1/2 of 2 inches is 1 inch, and I went ahead and added 1 inch on for the 1/2 inch seam allowances. And so my strip here, I cut the same length as my zipper, and it is 2 inches wide. And then I went ahead and put the right sides together. As far as I put the raw edge of the zipper against the raw edge of the fabric, so that with the 1/4 inch seam allowance, then turned it right side out, and then top stitched it. And what I did do, and I don't know if we can see it from here, but I pulled my fabric over to my zipper a little bit more. I made the fold closer to my zipper so that it's very close. I don't want very much of the zipper tape showing, and then I top stitched it that way. So I'm going to go ahead and cut the other strip for the other side of the zipper. I got the same 2 inches, but I'm going to be hiding the zipper with a flap. So I'm going to go ahead and add on an additional 2 inches. So I'm going to be cutting out a 4-inch wide strip, the length of the zipper. So for my other zipper placket, I ended up cutting a 4-inch wide piece, and I've folded one of the long ends over about a quarter, I folded over this about 1 3/8 of an inch or so, 1 1/4. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do a top stitch on this fold right here, and I'm going to do it about 1/8 of an inch away from the fold. So this is the placket that I just did the top stitching along this folded edge. So now I'm going to take my zipper, and with this fold facing up, this is the loose end right here, I'm going to put my zipper face down on this fold and line up the edge of the zipper with the edge of this raw edge right here, and then I'll sew along this part of the zipper here. And the reason I'm doing this is because I want my zipper to be completely hidden. If you look at it from this side, there's going to be a flap over that zipper. You won't even see it. I'm also, if you're noticing, I'm lining up my arrows over one another. So if you have any kind of directional fabric, it's only going to work for parts of, some of this. But anyway, And this part of it, it will work. So I got those arrows lined up too. I have enough play in my fabric here, I can position that way. So I'm going to go ahead now and finish putting this side of the zipper on. Just pin this and sew that right up and go to the next step. So this is the zipper placket finished, and you can see that the zipper will be completely hidden by this flap. And I'm going to share with you why I decided to do that. If you look at this cushion, the back portion of this is too small for a zipper opening just that big. You know, because this cushion is quite a bit wider in the front, and it would just be too small trying to get it through there. So I'm decided to make the zipper come out here on both sides. So it's going to show, the zipper placket will show, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to have a hidden zipper. I don't want to see the zipper from the sides of the chair. So what I'm going to go ahead and do now, my zipper placket is about a ½ inch or so too big. I'm going to trim it down to 3 inches wide, which was the rest of the side panels need to be 3 inches wide. And then I'm going to cut the length of that I need for the front portion of the cushion. It'll go back to this far, and I'll cut a little extra as far as the length so that overlaps, and I can I can make them meet just fine when I go to sew this all together. So I have the top of my cushion panel, and I have the zipper placket, and I'm at the middle back, and you can see there's kind of an arrow diamond shape right here. And what I'm wanting to do, and it only really matters right here at the very front, or at the very back and at the very front, but I'm going to match my pattern so that those arrows are smack dab in the center there. And then I'll pin, working my way around to the sides. And of course the pattern won't match when I go around the sides, but that doesn't really matter. I kind of like to have the center front and center back at least matching the pattern as best I can. I also have the zipper placket fold going down. I want to make sure it's going down on the cushions. It would not lay right if it was upside down the other way. So I'll go ahead and pin this around, and also do the side panel for the front and front sides. I've pinned the panels to the sides, for the sides, onto the top panel. And this is the center front. I've made sure that my design is centered and aligned. So what I've done is I have extra fabric on both sides where the zipper starts and ends. And this is where these pieces will be joining together. I have my piping marked where I want my joinery to be. And so I will only be sewing up to both ends of these. I'll only be sewing up a few inches shy of this mark. So this is also the point at which I want to sew as close to the piping as I can. So I have my zipper foot on, and I've also moved the needle position to the far left as far as I can without hitting the foot, and I'll be stitching that very close to the piping. So I have the zipper placket and the side panel sewn on, and so this is the point at which they intersect. And so what I do is I've left, I've stopped stitching back there, and I just finger walk this the rest of the way until I get to where my seam should be, which is right there. And then I mark my fabric where that seam needs to be. And I do the same for the other side. Walk it in and mark it where the seam needs to be. And then I'll pick up these two panels, line up those two marks, and then go ahead and stitch that. And that will give me the perfect fit. And I'll do that on the other side as well. Now before I sew that, right where that pin is, one of the things you have to make sure of is that your zipper pull is actually on the inside of that seam, because if it's on the outside, wow, you have to rip that out. Okay, I have the placket sewn to the other side seam right there. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to lay the seam allowance down away from the zipper placket, and then I'm going to do a top stitch about 1/8 of an inch away from that seam. All right, I have the side panel sewn all the way on for the onto the top, and you can see Here's the zipper access. So all I need to do now is just sew the bottom side of the cushion panel onto this, and this one will be complete. I have the bottom panel sewn onto the side panel, so it's actually completed now. But one of the things that I've done, and you can see right here, is I really just hate the way this fabric frays, and I just don't want to take any chances of it fraying anymore. Even though I've zigzagged it, it just makes me nervous. So what I'm doing here is I've bound my seam allowances, and it just gives it a nice, neater look, even though it won't be seen whenever you take it out and wash it. And, you know, I think it'll just help protect it too. So I'm going to go ahead and do this edge here, and then it'll be time to put it on the cushion. I've cut some cushion wrap, and I've trimmed it so, you know, both edges kind of go over the edge of the side of the cushion. And I'm just taking a needle. You can spray, you know, use spray adhesive to put this on, but I don't have any. I'm not going to go and buy some for this little project. I'm just whip stitching it on there real quick, and then it rounds off the corners a little bit more and makes it easier to stuff the cushion cover.